Good morning, everyone. Good morning to members of the media, and thank you for joining us for another post-cabinet press briefing. This morning, we will have a presentation from the Honorable Favour Williams, Minister of Education, Youth and Information. I am the Minister of State in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, Robert Nestor Morgan. Here with us also is Dr. Grace McLean, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, as well as Dr. Kassan Troop, Chief Education Officer, Acting in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. The Minister will make her presentation of Cabinet decisions, after which we will take questions from the media. So I'll now welcome Minister Favour Williams to the podium for her presentation.
Thank you, Minister Morgan. Good morning, everyone. Let me acknowledge the Honorable Robert Nestor Morgan, Minister of State here in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, Dr. Grace McLean, Permanent Secretary Acting, and Dr. Kassan Troop, our Chief Education Officer Acting. Let me acknowledge as well all the members of the media and others who are watching this morning, other support staff from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. Let me begin by noting that the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information takes note of the serious issues that have been outlined in the Auditor General's Performance Audit Report titled Nutrition Products Limited, Governance and Resource Management. And let me say, without a shadow of a doubt, that the findings demonstrate serious breaches of the government's Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act, and that, on reading the report, it may require further investigations by other constituted authorities empowered to take legal actions based on their findings. My instruction to the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information on learning that the Auditor General had initiated a report sometime before I took office was to cooperate with the Auditor General and provide any documents or support that was needed. Additionally, in terms of actions taken, you will note that a new board was put in place in December of 2020. The issue that the Auditor General raised in terms of the former board chair being chairman of the Procurement and Contracts Committee was brought to the attention of the new board chair as being an action that was outside of or that was not in keeping with good governance. Additionally, as you will note in the report, the issue of an external secretary being paid from April 2017 to January 21, $7.4 million to take minutes at the board meeting. That was flagged by the new board chair, and it was an activity that was discontinued in the first month of the new board. Additionally, as well, I would have taken a submission to Cabinet in June of this year to get Cabinet to ratify a decision that was taken in June of 2018, decision number 20/18, dated 4th of June 2018, which gave approval for the divestment or privatization of Nutrition Products Limited. Cabinet gave approval for the establishment of an enterprise team for the divestment or privatization of Nutrition Products Limited, and for the Development Bank of Jamaica as transaction managers to execute the divestment or privatization transaction in collaboration with the Nutrition Products Limited. We support the findings of the Auditor General's report and see it as a powerful tool for the reform of not just NPL, but as a guide to the proper management of entities that call on the national budget and expend taxpayers' money. As a minister and as a ministry, we stand ready to support any further investigations and pledge the full support of the ministry in that regards. And so let me say, let the chips fall where they may. I'll continue with the decisions from Cabinet. Cabinet approved the criteria for defining priority investment projects in Jamaica and the adoption of the proposed process for designating a priority project in keeping with the National Investment Policy Green Paper. The thrust to define and designate priority projects was an action emanating from the National Investment Policy, NIP. The policy provided a path for achieving Jamaica's established goals and objectives for sustainable economic development and carried the expectations of positively impacting job and wealth creation. The proposal for defining priority projects was an expansion of the designation of privately funded projects as a priority project policy strategy of the National Investment Policy. The creation of this designation is anticipated to significantly influence the ability of the country to attract and expedite high-impact investment. Cabinet also gave approval for the Electronic Document Record Management System project of the Bank of Jamaica for inclusion in the Public Sector Investment Program, or PSIP, for implementation. Currently, the Information and Data Governance Program of the Bank of Jamaica included record-keeping policies and practices that satisfy legal, regulatory, and business requirements. However, there remained unaddressed opportunities for the effective and efficient management of all records, with a centralized framework, improvements in business processes, and the control and reduction in costs associated with continued maintenance of all paper-based records. The Electronic Document Record Management System is being implemented by the Bank of Jamaica in an effort to improve its information and data governance program. This is in keeping with the efforts of the Government of Jamaica to propel the digitization of services across the public sector. In terms of the next Cabinet decision, Cabinet approved the hosting of the 10th Commonwealth Youth Ministers meeting in 2025 rather than in 2021. The Commonwealth Youth Ministers meeting happens every 4 years and allows for youth ministers to debate emerging development issues, share good practices, and identify collaborative opportunities. Due to the requirement for the event to be held in the face-to-face modality, Jamaica sought a deferral of this event. This rescheduling will afford Jamaica more time to prepare for the meeting and strategically position the country to leverage in an optimal way the benefits to be derived from hosting the meeting. Regulations to support the Disabilities Act. Cabinet gave approval for the tabling of the disabilities regulations for consideration by Parliament. Jamaica has always advocated for greater protection for persons with disabilities and was one of the first countries to ratify the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2007. In accordance with the convention, Jamaica was required to ensure that the principles of the convention were implemented into domestic law, which was done through the enactment of the Disabilities Act of 2014. Act sought to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment by persons with disabilities of privileges, interests, benefits, and treatment on equal basis with others. Despite the enactment of the Disabilities Act in 2014, the Act had not been operationalized as subsidiary legislation was needed for it to be effective, and the capacity of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities needed to be strengthened to effectively perform its mandate in accordance with the Act. The other decision relates to the proposed development of a National Archives and Records Management Act. Cabinet gave approval for the repeal and replacement of the Archives Act 1983 with a new act with nomenclature such as the National Archives and Records Management Act, in keeping with the new Government of Jamaica Records and Information Management Policy, which provides for a modern legislative framework for records and information management, and approval as well for the repeal and replacement of the Archives Official Records Regulations 1988. The Records and Information Management Policy, approved in July 2018, recognizes records as an important government asset and set out the framework by which all records and information are to be managed in the public sector. Cabinet also gave approval for the repeal of the Record Office Archives Rules 1969 as issued under Section 12 of the Record Office Act, and replaced with the new rules issued under the proposed National Archives and Records Management Act. The proposed act would be reconciled and aligned with provisions of the Access to Information Act where inconsistencies exist. In particular, the time for accessing archives and the Record Office archive rules would need to be repealed and replaced to be so reflected under the proposed act. Cabinet also gave approval for any consequential amendments that may arise and the issuance of drafting instructions to the Chief Parliamentary Council. Biosafety Policy for Jamaica. Cabinet approved the Biosafety Policy for Jamaica and its tabling in Parliament as a white paper. The submission advised that on 24th December 2012, the Government of Jamaica became a party to the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. The protocol recognized the potential benefits of modern biotechnology and sought to ensure the safe use, transfer, and handling of living modified organism, LMOs, considering the risks to biodiversity and human health. The Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change is the national focal point for the protocol. The Biosafety Policy for Jamaica outlined the framework to ensure an enabling environment for the safe development, use, and application of modern biotechnology. The policy seeks to manage the risk to Jamaica's agriculture and biodiversity and facilitate the development of a national modern biotechnology sector in a safe regulatory environment. The policy examines the variables and impacts on the country's economy, as well as the health, agriculture, industry, and other sectors. Moving on now to the Memorandum of Understanding on Cooperation in the Field of Diplomatic Training. Cabinet gave approval for the conclusion of a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade in Jamaica and the Sushma Swaraj Institute of Foreign Services of the Ministry of External Affairs in the Republic of India on cooperation in the field of diplomatic training and signing of the MOU by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Jamaica and the Republic of India had been actively engaged on a wide range of interests of on a wide range of issues of mutual interest. India has remained a close bilateral partner over the years, providing financial, technical, and capacity building support, including in the area of diplomatic training. The MOU is anticipated to improve future diplomatic course offerings by India to Jamaica, and the approval, signature, and entry into effect of this MOU would lead to deeper and more meaningful cooperation in diplomatic training with the government of India to support capacity building within the Jamaican Foreign Service. Proposed increase in Legal Aid Council's tariff of fees and proposed tariff of fees for complex criminal proceedings. Cabinet gave approval for an increase in the Legal Aid Council's tariff of fees in keeping with Section 42D of the Legal Aid Act of 15 to 25% of the average fees charged at the private bar. Cabinet also gave approval for the introduction of new fees for the restructured areas of the tariff of fees and for the tariff of fees to be prescribed under the Legal Aid Act for payment to empaneled attorneys at law, and the issuing of draft and instructions to the Chief Parliamentary Council for regulations to give effect to the actions outlined in the three actions outlined just now. The legal aid regime seeks to guarantee the constitutional rights of all accused persons to a fair trial regardless of the ability to pay for legal representation. The rationale for an increase in the tariff of fees was as a result of the current wide disparity between fees payable at the private bar and that of the fees applied by the Legal Aid Council to empaneled attorneys who offer legal aid services. Such wide disparity in the fee structure impacted the ability of the Legal Aid Council to meet the demand for legal aid services, as attorneys may opt not to take on the legal aid assignment, and obtaining an increase in the tariff of fees would allow the Legal Aid Council to access attorneys at law to accept cases of indigent accused persons in a timely manner. We move to the next one, COVID-19 allocation of resources for employees, the CARE program, assistance for employees of independent schools. Cabinet gave approval for the payment of a grant of $40,000 to academic and administrative staff and $25,000 to ancillary staff employed in independent schools. The government of Jamaica, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, had introduced a CARE program to assist businesses, individuals, and self-employed persons who had been impacted by the severe economic disruption brought on by the pandemic. The main sectors that had benefited from the program were tourism, business process outsourcing, transport, and municipality-related operations. To date, $15 billion in direct financial payments had been made since the program's inception. Despite the impact that the pandemic and the control measures had on Jamaica's educational institutions, employees in public educational institutions remained employed and continued to receive their salaries and relevant allowances. The CARE program made provision for persons working in early childhood institutions registered by the Early Childhood Commission, resulting in 2,140 officers receiving grant payment. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information had requested the extension of benefits under the CARE program to the employees of independent schools, as had been provided to the early childhood institutions. There are over 5,000 persons in 294 institutions registered with the Independent Schools Unit of the Ministry. The grant would only apply to employees of those independent schools at the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels, as approved and submitted to the CARE program by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. The provision of grants is estimated to cost $250 million and is being financed from the budgeted provision for the CARE program under the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. The next item is the Education System Transformation Program, Phase 2, Science, Technology, Engineering, the Arts and Mathematics Schools Project, or STEAM. Cabinet approved the Education System Transformation Program number 2, the Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts and Mathematics Schools Project, to be entered into the Public Sector Investment Program for implementation. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, seeking to improve the delivery of modernized quality education through the focused implementation of STEAM discipline, which again is the science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics. The ministry seeks to construct 6 such schools, STEM schools, and 1 visual and performing arts secondary level public educational institution, and to integrate and implement a fully integrated information and communication technology system that would meet the ICT needs at all levels of the education system. Cabinet also gave approval for the exclusion from the procurement proceedings of the school architectural design competition pertaining to these schools to be constructed, noting that Section 3.3 of the Public Procurement Act of 2015 made provisions for such exclusion. And with the approval of the Cabinet, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, upon completion of the competition for the design, may directly contract with the winning architect or an awardee in the competition for the provision of detailed drawings and design. The purpose of the school architectural design competition, which is open to citizens of Jamaica residing locally or overseas, is to acquire design excellence by obtaining the most suitable architectural solution, enable a fair and transparent process of selecting professional expertise, and acquire the project documentation in furtherance of the project implementation. The last Cabinet decision relates to the settlement of matters relating to Jamaica Aircraft Refueling Services Limited. Cabinet gave approval for the conclusion of the omnibus agreement proposed to be entered between Jamaica Aircraft Refueling Services Limited, JARS, Petrojam Limited, and BP Holdings International. JARS is a company that was incorporated in July 1999 under the laws of Jamaica as a result of a joint venture between BP Holdings International and Petrojam Limited. Petrojam holds 49% of the shares of JARS, and BP owns the remaining 51% of the shares. JARS provides aircraft refueling services, and it's been doing this since 1999 to the international airports in Jamaica, and was the exclusive supplier of interplane refueling services at the Tinston Fen Aerodrome and the Ian Fleming International Airport. So that concludes the decisions of Cabinet. I'll move on now to the reports and then the contracts. Just a minute. In terms of reports, Cabinet received and approved the following annual reports and our financial statements to be tabled in Parliament. Annual report of the University Council of Jamaica 2018-2019. Annual reports of the Runaway Bay Water Company Limited 2014-2015, 2015-2016, 2016-2017. Annual report for Students' Loan Bureau, year ended March 31, 2017. Annual reports of the National Water Commission 2016-2017 and 2017-2018. In terms of contracts, Cabinet gave approval for the award of a contract for the supply and delivery of 100 millimeter, 200 millimeter, 300 millimeter nominal diameter ductile pipes and associated fittings for the Whitehall water supply in St. Thomas in the amount of $61,928,485.70, inclusive of GCT, and this contract was awarded to Derek A. Gibson Limited. Cabinet also gave approval for the award of contract for the provision of private security services at all 53 locations of the Human Employment and Resource Training National Service Training Agency Trust, HART NSTA Trust, island-wide for a period of 3 years, each inclusive of GCT. And these contracts were broken down into 5 zones, and I'll quickly run through those. In Zone 1, Vanguard Security Limited received a contract in the amount of $240,365,578.45. In Zone 2, Quest Security Services Limited was awarded a contract in the amount of $283,362,438. In Zone 3, Vanguard Security Limited was awarded a contract of $126,414,515.81. And in Zone 4, Allied Protection Limited was awarded a contract in the amount of $267,050,424. And in Zone 5, also Allied Protection Limited, in the amount of $218,623,795.20. Cabinet also gave approval for the award of a contract to undertake the construction of Phase 2 of a classroom block at the Black River High School in St. Elizabeth in the amount of $141,547,279.04, and this contract was awarded to Morris Hill Limited. Cabinet gave approval for the award of contract for the provision of private security services for a period of 3 years for eGov Jamaica Limited in the amount of $61,052,493.75, including GCT, to Allied Protection Limited. And from the Ministry of Education, Cabinet gave approval for the award of a contract for the supply and distribution of grade 6 language arts and science workbooks to be provided to students at primary schools under the primary textbook program for the 2021-2022 academic year in the amount of $107,172,800, and this contract was awarded to Cheetah Toys and More, LLC. And finally, Cabinet gave approval for the award of a contract for the supply and distribution of mathematics workbooks for grade 5 and 6 students at primary schools under the primary textbook program for the 2021-2022 academic year in the amount of $110,532,960, and this contract was awarded to Book Zone Limited. That concludes the major decisions of Cabinet. Reports are tendered and contracts that were awarded. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, everyone. At this time, we'll be taking questions from our journalists on the Zoom platform. Please use the raise hand. It's on. Good morning, everyone. At this time, we'll be taking questions from our journalists on the Zoom platform. Please use the raise hand feature. Once acknowledged, state your name, the media house that you're representing, then go ahead and ask your question. I believe first in line is Kimone Francis. Go ahead, Kimone.
Morning, Minister. Can we get some clarity on the current role of the Nutrition Products Limited in the feeding programs with schools closed? And question 2, has Cabinet signed off on the PCJ? If so, at what cost and who is the purchaser? The third question, has the Ministry of Education sought legal advice on the possibility of ending the contracts of Rural Reed and Fritz Pinnock at JC and CMU respectively?
Okay, in terms of, I'm sorry, I was trying to write while you were speaking. Your first question relates to NPL. Could I ask you to right, the role of NPL in the school feeding program. So NPL, if you look at the totality of the school feeding program, NPL would represent less than 10% of that program. As you know, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, through the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, provide for a school feeding for PATH students, but it also uses NPL to complement what it provides in schools through canteens and either through direct transfer of funds. NPL is used to provide snacks and breakfast items to schools, and many times this is extended beyond PATH students to needy children who the principal on the ground would determine is in need of some nutrition. So that's in terms of the magnitude of NPL, I'd say less than 10% of the total nutrition program for schools. All right. Could I ask you to repeat the one about PCJ?
Sure. Has Cabinet signed off on the PCJ, and if so, at what cost and who is the purchaser?
Okay, for that one, what I do know is that the analytical work about PCJ continues. I don't believe that it has been concluded yet. And so questions with regards to cost and so on, and exactly the direction of that would not be available this morning. So we await the completion of the team that's working on that.
And the one about
legal advice?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So of course, considering the nature, the sensitive nature of those issues, of course, we would have sought legal advice as to exactly what is the direction, what should we do. At this moment, we still await the conclusion of that, and so we would not have anything additional to report this morning.
Next question now is from Prince Moore of TVJ. Can the minister say how many students have been vaccinated and how soon will face-to-face classes resume?
Okay. In terms of the vaccination, as I reported in Parliament last week, Wednesday, some 70, what was the number? 78,000, a little over 78,000. 78,195 would have at least received their first dose of the vaccination. And in terms of face-to-face, as I've always said, we are living through a health crisis, a pandemic, and so we have to work hand in hand with the Ministry of Health and Wellness in terms of the decision with regards to face-to-face. We continue our efforts in terms of vaccination, and as you're well aware, we await more Pfizer vaccines for students. When those arrive, we will continue our efforts. We'll scale up our efforts. We've been vaccinating our students across our schools in Jamaica, across some of our schools, our major schools that have been fixed points for vaccination. All our school leaders on the ground are activated, and so we know at the moment when we are given the go-ahead again by the Ministry of Health and Wellness that we will be able to continue at a fast pace.
Roxroy McLean, please unmute your mic and go ahead and ask your question.
Good morning, Ms. Williams. My question, I have 3 questions. 1, what is the budget of the Legal Aid Council for lawyers providing services in the Clans trial now on? Part 2 of that question is the lawyers in the Clans trial are unhappy with the amount. What is the rate that has been agreed on and overall budget? And 2, my second question is, how many students, based on your best information, are without devices such as tablets and laptops? And 3, face-to-face learning. Is it a case that any school that gets 65% vaccination rate will reopen? And if so, are any school close to that?
Okay. So with regards to your 3 questions, the budget of legal aid and the rates that lawyers get, that is a question that I would have to take to the Ministry of Justice in order to get that answer. That would be a specific number that can only be available from that ministry. So if you desire the answer to this question, I'll do that. I will ask the Minister of Justice to be able to provide the answer to that. In terms of your second question, how many students are without devices? That's difficult to say for the following reasons. The government is not the only provider of devices to students. Parents, friends, relatives of students would have given students devices that we would not have been able to track. So far, we've only been able to track what the government has done through all the programs that we have, the 4 programs that we have. What we do know, however, is that, and this is data that we track, is the number of students who sign on to the online platforms. And, those are numbers that we would track. And we track those last school year, and we will begin to do so as the school year ramps up. And in terms of face-to-face, the 65% threshold, I know of at least one school that has reported that they're very close. The name I would not want to disclose this morning, but they've been very aggressive in getting their students, aggressive in a good way, not a bad way, in getting their students to be vaccinated.
Siobhan Campbell, go ahead. Please unmute your mic and go ahead and ask your question. Okay. We're not hearing you, Siobhan. Okay, we'll move on to Jamila Maitland.
Morning, Minister.
Good morning.
Jamila here from TVJ. I have 3 questions. I wanted to find out what is the situation at the Merle Grove High School. I saw a report that a meeting was held. I just want to find out if things are resolved and how soon, if not. I also wanted to ask, to what extent are security companies, when they are contracted, I want to see their ability to abide by some of the labor codes. To what extent does that play a part in the government contracts that they receive? I'm not saying in these security companies that were selected, but there are some issues as it relates to payments of NHT, NIS, and these issues that security officers often complain about, and even some who provide services for government-run institutions. What extent do these requirements play a part in those who are selected? And three, Pfizer recently announced that their clinical trials for children between the ages of 5 to 11 are safe, and they're planning on submitting documents to the FDA to be approved. To what extent is the ministry, mulling over that to see if they can get a slice of that pie if it's approved by the FDA and then similarly by WHO? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jamelia. Let me start with your first question with regards to Merle Grove. So yes, I did have a meeting with the board of Merle Grove High School last Friday. The board chair gave his presentation, and during that presentation, he indicated that the decision of the board was referred to the personnel committee. And as such, after the board chair gave his report, and after us asking the principal, who was at that meeting as well, if she would like to say anything, to which she declined because of the formal process that has been started, we obviously had to end that meeting once it was established that the board had referred its decision to the personnel committee. It's a formal process that has begun that we have to allow to take its place, and so we could not at that meeting entertain any questions or us answer answer to any of the issues that would have been raised during a question and answer session. So we await the decision or the deliberations of the personnel committee. There are other steps that can be taken after that, and as I said, we just have to await that process in terms of it just taking place. In terms of your second question about security companies and their ability to abide by labor codes, what I'm aware of is that currently it's an issue that is for which I know legal opinions are being sought, and if I'm not mistaken, I thought there was a court matter as well, and so I would not be able to elaborate on that question. I know it's been an issue that has been raised over the years, and as far as I know, that I believe, and I'll double check on this, that it had gone to as far as becoming a court matter. In terms of Pfizer and the news that it could be available for children 5 to 11 years of age, I did raise a question with the Minister of Health and Wellness, and as you indicated, there's still more information that would need to be had, and the Ministry of Health and Wellness obviously would have to deliberate on this. As soon as they indicate to us their position, then we stand guided by that.
Next question is from Maisha Brody from IRI FM. Minister, the JTA is calling on the government to undertake a review of teachers' salaries. Do you have any comment on this?
Okay. So the issue of teachers' salaries is the purview of the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, and it would be very, very inappropriate of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information to comment on it, especially in such a sensitive time as this, when negotiations, talks have been going on. And so I will decline to make any comments on that. Again, it's the purview of the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service.
Next in line is Ms. Zara Burton. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Minister,
Minister, good morning.
Morning.
There was a question I think Kimon asked, somebody did maybe, about Reed and about the ministry. Was it you, as the minister, that approved these salary payments to Ruel Reed? So I don't know if that could be answered just because it was asked. I didn't hear it. Maybe you did answer, but I didn't hear it. Secondly, just my set of questions now. I wanted to know, I had asked for some data on Petrojam ownership and you converted it. You said you would get back to me as soon as possible, but then you converted it to an access to information request, which after 2 months has still not been answered. And I was wondering if I could get that information because I have not been able to get it from the Ministry of Finance regarding monies in escrow for the Venezuelan government. So I was wondering about that, if I could get an update on those questions. Secondly, I wanted to know, and this might be a question more for Dr. Grace McLean, but if you know, that would be fantastic. What is the relationship, monetary and otherwise, between Hocking College and the Ministry of Education? How long has the relationship been around? And what is the value, monetary-wise, of the amounts we paid out over the years with this university or college?
I'll ask the PS to take that one with regards to Hocking College. With regards to Petrojam's ownership and monies in escrow, again, the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service is the entity that has that information, that would decide whether or not they make that information public. And I think you mentioned that you would have used the access to information for that information. So I am not able to say this morning. I could have follow-up discussions with the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service to get their exact position on this, and I could commit again to getting back to you on that. And in terms of Mr. Reed, I'm sorry, was there a question or you were just asking if the question was answered?
Johnson, you're next in line.
Sorry. The question was it you as the Minister of Education that had approved the continuing payments to Ruel Reed?
I'm not aware that ministers can approve payments. In government, I know that the accounting officer is the permanent secretary. With regards to payments and approvals and so on, that would be the purview of the permanent secretary. And so, P.S., you want to answer the question? So.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Good morning, everyone. Zara, with regards to the question that you asked about Hocking College, the Ministry of Education, through the Occupational Associate degree, signed an MOU with Hocking College. I think it could have been about 2016. That MOU has now expired, so the ministry does not have a relationship currently with Hocking College. Just to say, the MOU at the time spoke to reviewing the programs because of the nature of their programs as it relates to occupational associate degree, and to utilize some of their expertise in terms of the programs that were being developed at the time. There was no financial relationship that was a part of the Memorandum of Understanding. I will say, however, that I believe there was a particular year through the Heart Trust NTA where there was a study tour of persons who actually visited the Hocking College to view and to observe their educational processes there. The cost for that program, I would have to do the research and get back to you. But currently there is no relationship with the ministry and Hocking College.
Next in line is Mr. Jovan Johnson. Please go ahead and unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hi, good morning, Minister Williams.
Good morning.
Jovan Johnson from the Gleaner. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Two questions, Minister. One, this is in relation to the investment by the Airports Authority of Jamaica and the NMIAL in the First Rock Capital Holdings. In July, we were told the Prime Minister said that he was not fully briefed, though he said that he was gravely concerned. Since then, we've had two major revelations. One, that the boards went against an initial recommendation not to do so because the company had limited financial and operational history. We also now know that ministry representatives on either board were not included in the decision making. I want to get from you what's the latest position of the administration on these issues. And the second question, this of course relates to some polls we have been running, the RGR Gleaner Dunn Anderson polls showing declines, fall-offs in the popularity of the government. What's the response of the administration to that development as well?
All right. With regards to your first question in terms of Airport Authority of Jamaica, you've asked what's the latest position of the ministry. I'd imagine the various ministries, right? The Ministry of Transport and Mining. And Jovan, other than that information that you just presented and the fact that those ministries would have been looking into the situation, I don't have a more updated position than that this morning. This is something that I could go back to the Ministry of Transport and Mining to find out what is the latest on this. And the polls, with regards to the polls, polls are conducted from time to time that give any government that's in power a sense of where they are. And it's incumbent upon the government to take these polls seriously, to find out what are the underlying issues that would cause the changes, especially if they're negative changes. And so, as you can imagine, the government does take these polls seriously and will be, I'm sure, in terms of analyzing the various questions that were asked and the responses that were given. And I'm sure that in the go forward, in terms of making or taking any actions, that would be done in terms of what this government would do.
At this time, we'll take one final question from Siobhan Campbell of Nationwide News. Is Cabinet aware of the concerns regarding ICT security lapses raised by the Auditor General at the Passport, Immigration and Citizen Agency? Has PICA given assurances that citizens' data has not been compromised?
Okay, so this report to which you refer would have been tabled in Parliament yesterday. So I am sure that the respective ministry and minister would be looking at the details of that report and querying the entity, and that minister and ministry would be ensuring that all the recommendations of the Auditor General, that they be taken seriously and that the necessary actions be followed to ensure that in the event there's another audit doing a similar audit, that whatever was highlighted in the report, that those issues would have been dealt with during the course. So I know, just to say that we do take these Auditor General reports seriously. And I know that all the ministers, all of my colleague ministers, will, in consultation or in collaboration with the PSs in their various ministries, do sit down and discuss these reports and ensure that action follows from these reports and these recommendations that surface in the Auditor General's reports. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If there are no remaining questions, thank you, and we see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone. Do join us again in another 2 weeks for the next post-cabinet press briefing. Have a good day.